Well, hello, friends. Father Gar here. I know in normal times I would have taken the opportunity during my sermon or the sermon the week before the annual meeting for us to have a conversation about the state of the parish and for me to give my annual address. So instead of doing that this year, I'm offering this via a video. So I hope you're tolerant of that slight change and it might give you a chance to listen and to take a look. So I'm going to have some graphics either on this side or on this side of me, depending on how it comes out, kind of highlighting what I'm talking about. The first thing I wanted to start with was a little bit of scripture from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. Paul is writing to the church in Corinth during a time when they're facing challenges and calamity and they're under persecution. And so he writes these words both in the first and second letter of the Corinthians. And through these letters, which we have in the Bible now, of course, we establish a lot of things in the church. And so maybe we don't think about that, but let's touch base with our history and a little bit of what Paul has to say. In chapter 4, he writes, "Therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." In this writing, Paul is encouraging the people of Corinth to focus on what is the heart of faith, which is focusing our life and our souls and our minds and all of that as we talk about each Sunday in our way of focusing in on God and keeping our heart in the right place. I don't think any of us would challenge that this last year has been difficult in so many different ways, from our initial shutdowns and shelter at home to a summer where we were sort of in a very tenuous spot where we could do some things but had to be careful. And then, of course, this fall, as case rates went up, as schools stopped meeting in person, as all of the challenges that we face, and as the number of people around us who've been sick. I think I've talked to lots of you, and we all have someone in our family or someone who's a neighbor. Either we know people who've passed away from COVID, or we know many people who've suffered in their businesses and jobs and in their lives. And many of you have had COVID in the last year. And of course, we're in a very different spot as we have some light and some hope. But I thought it might be important to think about that and who we are as a church. I think more than ever, we've probably discovered some things that we already knew, but maybe didn't quite focus on. And that is, the church is not a building, but the church is the people who gather. And even in a year when we couldn't gather in the same way, we made ways to do things. And I'm so proud of our leadership in the church and all of you for your commitment to the faith, but also your commitment to being a strong congregation and to living out these words that Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians about keeping our minds on the right things while we're going through times of trouble. Just for fun, I have a couple of prayer books that have been given to me. One is from a family member. This one would have been published in 1893. This one was published in the middle of the Civil War. Both of them are the 1789 prayer book, so you might not know that there was one going back that far. They were used by people in those times of history, and I'm lucky to have them in my office. And I always love these little things because it reminds me that the church has been around through all kinds of calamity and difficulty and points in history. And we're called to be, in this moment, in this community, in the city of Overland Park, a place of the gospel and a place of faith, just as those people were called in their moments to be people of faith. Early in the year, the staff and I and Vestor members set some goals. When we knew that we would not be back in the building for a long time, despite our initial hopes, we started thinking that we're going to be at this for a while, and so we made some goals. And those goals are pretty simple. They're grounded in our baptismal covenant, but just listen to them. We wanted to stay as connected as possible as a congregation, be flexible and adapt to the current realities, keep our people healthy and safe in the ways that we have control of that, continue our ministry as an anchor in the community of faith and also to our people, and be faithful to the Gospels and know that the church has been here before and that our goal is to go through this and not to be afraid. Throughout that time, we've had a couple of different principles that we relied on. Things like the church and God matter to the people. We're present to each other as much as possible because being in community is what it means to be the church. Whenever we make decisions, try to think long term and don't just do something for the immediacy that's ahead of us. And then the biggest thing is that we not lose heart and not lose our faith, just as Paul wrote to the Second Corinthians in the second letter to the Second Corinthians, that we don't want to lose our faith in the midst of the challenges. And boy, there have been challenges this year. Some of the realities of the year is in early March, it was determined that we could not meet in the building. And just even with just a few weeks in there, 6 to 8 weeks, we were able to use the building with very small worship groups. We had been outside of our sanctuary. During that time, our congregation has seen tremendous shifts. We shifted all of our groups and ministries to online church, whether it be through YouTube, Facebook, or any number of things. We've also focused our ministry in completely different ways by using Zoom for Sunday school and our small groups and education offerings. Our youth group has continued to meet mostly outside, sometimes just on Zoom. We were able to still have some of our summer camps with a lot of adjustments and changes. Some of our small groups have continued to meet with great willingness and ability. Our formation offerings have adapted. We've even created new Bible studies and new opportunities, and we've had some great guest speakers come in to offer things at different points. Our prayer ministry and our pastoral care ministries have continued and been adapted to the current realities. We've continued with meal service to those who are in need. We now have ministry to drop off helpful tools for those who might be in quarantine. And throughout the year, our vestry and other leaders made calls to the entire congregation 4 times to connect with people and to make sure that we're checking in and to help them to know what was going on and where we're connecting. This has been a challenging year, that's for sure. But think back to all the things that we've done and all the different ways we've found to minister. When you look at your parochial report, you'll see some changes. It's not as thick as it has been in the years past, but we've continued to be the church in our community. I think of how Barbara in our children's ministry have adapted her curriculum and even finding a great way to do our children's pageant. I think of Beth and our music and all of our musicians being willing to record and do things in all new ways, and the number of choir anthems that we've created and just the number of pieces of music. We tallied up yesterday, we've recorded 189 different hymns throughout the year in a variety of different ways. I think of Mary Beth in the office and how she's had to adapt to doing things completely differently, including moving our database over to a whole new system so that we could be ready for a long future. And also just managing the office with skill and ability, even at times when it was just her and I able to come in to the office to work. I think of Kelly and the adaptations to youth group and also her new effort in creating the neighborhood groups to help us all stay connected not only now, but to build our community into even deeper community in the years to come. I think of all our many different pastoral ministries and outreach ministries, from Tom's Helpers to our food drives, to our pickup Sundays and drop-off Sundays and all the different things that we've done. We as a church have been resilient and willing to do new and different things. I really miss Sundays and Saturdays when we would gather for worship, and I know you do too. I really miss hearing the church being full of children and adults busy about their way. I miss being exhausted on Sunday afternoons and needing a 2 or 3 hour nap to recover from all the work that had happened. I miss during the week the people coming in and out and hearing choir rehearsals and seeing the youth group meet and all of that different stuff that happened. But I'm so grateful to all of you for your willingness to make the changes that we needed to make and to be willing to roll with the punches, so to speak, as it seems that each week the goalpost moved just a little bit and things were always evolving, just as they're continuing to evolve right now. We have been careful in this year, and our vestry has worked hard to care for the building and to do some work, as I'm sure you'll have a chance to read in the annual report. Everything from resurfacing the parking lot to painting our beautiful cross tower to preparing to eventually add a bell to that tower, to the incredible work in our gardens and plans for those, to just the normal maintenance and other work that we've had to do. In each decision and the opportunity with a different time frame, we have tried to make some decisions and do some things we've always wanted to do. As I mentioned before, we moved into an entirely new database system that will allow easier access and easier communication. We've shifted our email and other communication systems to those that would integrate with that same system so that we're more efficient. We've also worked through the generosity of many of our members to install permanent streaming equipment so that when we're able to come back to church, we'll be able to easily stream our services so that people can access them just as we do now at any time and at any hour online, but also continue to connect the congregation in all new ways. We've also began thinking about what it's going to be like when we come back together and what ministries we might keep and what we might change. These are exciting times, but also challenging times for us. I ask our leadership team, the staff, and also those on the vestry that help me, and our wardens and others, what they might be grateful for in this year and what they saw. And here's just a few things that I'm going to highlight for you. Our church, despite the challenges and despite not meeting in person in the regular way, has grown. We have welcomed about 12 new families into the household, and I'm eager for you all to be able to meet them in person, and I'm eager for them to be able to see the congregation in its fullest. We're really grateful that most of our congregation has stayed engaged in some way, either by being in their small group, participating in studies, being online in worship, offering to lecture online, or to read the prayers, or showing up in our outdoor services, or helping with the parking lot services, or simply being willing to show up and to be here. You all have been willing to change and to adapt as well as we have. After the shelter at home, we're really grateful to all of you who offered assistance both to support the church and also to support those in our community facing challenges. I can't tell you how many phone calls I had in those first few months from members wanting to make sure that their pledges were updated, to make sure if the church needed something, they knew that we could call on them, but also they made sure to offer from their abundance help to others in the community. And that help has come throughout the year, and we've been able to assist many people with monetary gifts, with help with utilities, with help with other expenses that have come along as they've faced different challenges, and also in our support of other organizations. We're grateful to the Outreach Committee and others who have adapted to whole new realities, including recently receiving a grant from the Kansas Leadership Center to create survival bags for people in education and others that might need them. We're grateful to those who have helped with all of our online things, from reading to our peace videos to our music and other offerings. And we're grateful for the staff and vestry. They have operated as a solid team in the midst of real challenges. If anything that we've learned this year is we're a church not dependent on a building, and we can reach far beyond the walls that we have and anything that we imagined before. There's so many people I need to thank, and there's so many people we need to thank as a congregation. But mostly I hope you hear in this annual meeting the good news that we have to tell of the story of a very faithful congregation, a very resilient congregation, a very adaptable congregation, and a congregation that has a very bright future despite all of the challenges that we have before us. Those same goals that I mentioned before are still our guiding principles in this time. We're not out of COVID by any means, though we have some hope with the vaccines coming on and now case rates are beginning to drop. We'll have an in-between time in the coming weeks ahead and months ahead where we might have to have our feet in two different places. We'll be eager to get back, but we also need to pay attention to our public health officials and to be cautious. And eventually, when we are able to get back, we'll have some rebuilding to do. We haven't been together as an entire community for over 12 months. And it's going to take some time for us to figure out how to do things again. I know that's hard to imagine, but I know if I just take a few weeks off vacation, coming back and doing a service, sometimes it feels like I don't know anything. But just imagine what it's going to be like for us after a year. So I ask for your patience and your resilience and your adaptability and all those things that we've lived through in this time. I hope you know how faithful all of the staff have been, your vestry and other leaders, throughout this time, and their willingness to do everything. I'm so grateful to all of you that I have the opportunity to lead this congregation, and I have to tell you, this has been the most interesting, challenging, and exhausting year in my 23 years of ministry, and I'm so glad that I get to do it with you. Thanks for paying attention, and I hope to see you Wednesday night at our meeting, and we have lots of other things to say and to do. And before I go, I want to thank one person in particular in the congregation who's done a ministry for 3 decades, and that's Rosemary Abbott. I have a whole folder full of her newsletters that she gave me when I arrived so I could get to know the history of the congregation. She has been our historian and, in many ways, the keeper of our communication for so long. And I'm just very grateful to her ministry that's been steadfast and consistent for so many decades and through almost all of the rectors that served here. So, Rosemary, well done, good and faithful servant, and enjoy your retirement. And thanks again to all of you, from our choir members to our altar guild, to our youth group, to the office volunteers, to our Tom's helpers, to our readers and lectors, to our Eucharistic ministers, to our prayer team and our pastoral care teams, to our outreach, and to all those who lead small groups and neighborhood groups, to our Invite, Welcome, Connect team. I know I'm not going to name everybody, but also to our clergy, to Fran and Kelly, and to our amazing staff and our vestry. Thank you for being faithful, and thank you for living out Paul's words as we heard them earlier. God bless, and I can't wait to see you and tell you more on Wednesday evening.